I'm a little confused, folks. Who or what is this porridge person? Hey folks, MasakoX here. When it comes to Dragon Ball Super, things have gotten rather interesting and, dare I say it, far more nutritious and relevant towards the delights of the breakfast table since planet Cereal came into view. And since we have arrived on that planet, things about Dragon Ball Super have actually gotten far more curious and have begun to even also get a little more intriguing, something that I thought would never happen in Super, in that a lot of the challenges of the show are being turned on their heads and thusly making things far more compelling than ever before in this present series of Dragon Ball. You can check out more about the challenges brought by Granola in our video up top if you wish to explore that particular chestnut. So, in our continued exploration of the Granola arc and how it's been one of the most innovative of the series, we have been focusing mainly on our main antagonist slash anti-hero, as well as Goku and Vegeta's relationship to their divine training and how they've been getting on. We've been also explaining about the Heaters, our sort of anti-hero group type thing, Bojack facsimile, and how their approach towards this world that Toriyama first created is something to be lauded and credited. Also, how their name is the opposite of Frieza's, as well as their operations and means of going about things. They're complete opposites, and the name thing, it just blew my mind. But you know what? I think we're forgetting one crucial part of this arc that was established at the beginning. Something literally hidden in front of our very eyes, and quite frankly, has been sort of forgotten in recent chapters. Deliberately or not, we need to ask ourselves the question, who or what is Oatmeel? This is Oatmeel. End of video. See what we did there? Food puns? Well, aside from making fun of breakfast, or should we be praising breakfast? Yeah, we should be praising it. We cannot say that Oatmeel's appearance has really been setting fans ablaze around the time of chapter 72. But that's not an overly big problem yet, because we can always speculate about the identity of Granola's sidekick still, and still have a little bit of intrigue and mystery. And maybe see later how wrong we were and learn from our foibles, because it's totally okay to be wrong. Still, even though we haven't had further elaboration as to the composition of this creature or entity or whatever, we think it would be fun regardless to conjure up notions as to Oatmeel's purpose and properties. We actually have at least 5 ideas as to who the mysterious individual known as Oatmeel might be. Let's look at all the clues that we have thus far and try to form those theories. Let's go. Our first theory is that they're another Cerealian, or a consciousness of one. Could the bounty hunter have been lying about being truly the last Cerealian in existence, literally? I mean, the name pun says it all, right? Oatmeel has to be another Cerealian. It all fits. All the cereal puns, granola, oatmeal, it's like with the Saiyan nomenclature or the Freezer Soldier nomenclature, right? Well, there are some problems with that notion though that we need to touch upon before maybe considering this to be viable. The first major concern we have is that Granola often refers to himself as the last of the Cerealians with some finality, with conviction to boot. It isn't just stating this as a fact, but rather as a title, a proclamation. You know, sort of like how Doctor Who declares himself as last of the Time Lords. You know, despite the Master being around sometimes and the whole Gallifrey time pocket shebang thing, but that's besides the point. Also, knowing the Saiyans, they tend to finish the job. They weren't usually known as being slack or merciful. So, Oatmeel still being alive, kinda sloppy. Also, the last chapter seems to suggest that Frieza wasn't really interested so much in the planet, but the literal purge of the Cerealian people. The rock itself, though, had some sort of value, or maybe Frieza didn't care. Certainly not caring enough to blow it up. Vegeta also says something about a tribe driven to extinction, known for their evolved right eyes. It really all does seem like Frieza didn't want the planet. Unless, of course, it was the Heaters that had to fight Frieza's forces for the planet, which actually might have made things interesting. It might have not been a two-way battle. It might have been actually the reason why Gas has unpleasant memories of planet Cereal. Could the battle that Granola was in been between 3 parties? The Heaters, the Saiyans, and the Frieza Force? We don't really know that yet fully, but we might find out soon enough. But the direct war against Frieza himself, though, it doesn't really seem like their style, and we even know that the direct confrontation was something that they actually dreaded. What we're trying to get at is that the invasion of planet Cereal was never about conquest. It was connected to the extermination of the Cerealians themselves. Subjugation was not a factor at all. Now, why would Frieza want the Cerealians of all people dead? Well, you see, Frieza was always about eliminating races he considered being a threat to himself. It wasn't just the Saiyans. The universe doesn't always revolve around the Saiyans. There are other civilizations that could threaten Frieza in some way. Yes, he was swayed by Beerus to target Saiyans most of all, but Frieza was worried about the Saiyans anyway. Beerus just gave him the impetus and justification to act upon his worries. And then there is one small detail in the Broly movie to bring up. Do you remember those snipers at the beginning, during the flashback thing with the Saiyans? Frieza sees them because of the scouter that he was gifting to the monkeys, something that the Saiyans were unaware Cold or his son had prior to this. Now, think about it. Would Saiyans have had snipers set up in place if they knew that they could not take out at least one of the tyrants? King Cold, Frieza, or maybe both? And also, snipers? I don't think that's really in the Saiyan form book now naturally, is it? Could they have had outside help? Maybe education about sniping? Maybe it's just not their specialty. They kind of acquired it from Cerealians? We know that Frieza's race is pretty durable, but maybe they have vital parts, weaknesses which, like Cell's supposed nucleus, could cause their demise if it were to be damaged. Perhaps that's the infamous glue bark for you. And whilst the Saiyan snipers failed, there is a species that is literally designed by evolution to succeed every single time. Cerealians. So, Frieza probably made sure that they were purged too from the galaxy for its own safety. Get rid of Cerealians and Saiyans. Of course, Granolah is living proof that the Saiyans didn't purge all of them, and seeing Granolah's flashbacks to the actual decimation from all that time ago, it is hard not to think that Great Ape Bardock took pity on the kid having kids of his own, not viewing him specifically as a threat. But what if there was one more survivor? One that Granolah wanted to protect due to their, well, rarity, if the Cerealians were being threatened. We think that if Oatmeel is a Cerealian, they fall into one of two potential categories. The first one is they are in very rough shape right now, probably disabled by their experiences with the Saiyans long ago. That was Haverock's specifically first guess, but this then begets another question. Why didn't Granolah use the Cerealian Dragon Balls to heal his friend Oatmeel before asking for power? Some friend, eh? After all, you can use the Cerealian Dragon Balls again instantly if you can find them quick enough. That's why we believe the next option is more likely, that Oatmeel is the mind of a Cerealian that has survived the death of their physical body and might be occupying Granola's goggles in some way. Perhaps his mind has been downloaded into there, so that their essence endures in some way. You see, Oatmeel feels like a real person in the way they talk, and a real companion who knows about Granola's deepest, darkest problems, like they were close. They are his confidant, and know his worries and tries to be the voice of consciousness for our anti-hero. Where have they been in the last few chapters now you think about it? But still, they do not share his hatred for the Saiyans, or at least not as passionately. And they don't seem to share the same trauma that Granolah has specifically. Like they didn't have the same memories. If they were a true Cerealian, they would most likely have had the similar attitude towards Saiyans and the whole Frieza thing. So, maybe there's a more likely explanation at play, that Oatmeel is an artificial intelligence inhabiting Granola's goggles. Now, this one seems to me the most logical out of all the options on this list. I think if this were to be true, we would probably be nodding going like, yeah, that makes sense. The problem is though, that whilst we've had our fair share of androids and robots in Dragon Ball, we don't know how empathic Dragon Ball AI can be in that world. On one hand, it's easy to view Oatmeel as maybe just a synthetic voice from the goggles themselves. Question for you guys, by the way. How do you imagine the voice of Oatmeel to be from what you've seen thus far? For some reason, Hav seems to picture a feminine voice, and probably me too, since AI voices in media tend to be on the feminine side. I think that just is a common thing, yeah, personal assistants and whatnot. But we have stated the voice of consciousness before in an earlier part of this discussion. And Oatmeel doesn't only analyse things, they ask Granolah to be cautious in his actions, and seem to show genuine concern for his nightmares and troubles. AI don't often show that level of emotion and empathy in that capacity. But not only that, but they show concern over Monaito as well, him being alone throughout Granola's madness. They ask Granolah why he doesn't want to live with the Shigarians as well. You know, how stubborn the bounty hunter is to not integrate with the now population of his homeworld, not even try. But they're never too pushy though, Oatmeel. They just tend to politely suggest things rather than bossing Granolah around. Couldn't AI do all those things really? I mean, yeah, it's plausible. We've seen enough media to talk about such high moral lessons about machines, but they usually don't end well. But But is it typical of what appears to be a bounty hunter's tactical system to worry about their master's adopted grandfather? Not really. So yeah, the AI theory does hold water for now, but at the same time, we don't really know what they can do and what they can't do in the world of Dragon Ball. That's up for debate. But then there's also the fact that it could be another Toriyama subversion, a very tiny creature inside the goggles. Look, we all know how Toriyama likes to mess around with us. Maybe not so much now as he did back in the day, but he still likes to have a little joke. We remember Damon from the Tournament of Power. Would it really be that much of a stretch to have a little thing like him living in Granola's goggles? Maybe the Cerealians were partnered with those bug people from Universe 4. Or maybe it is something that's true only to Granola. But, judging how noticeably Oatmeel was absent from the last chapter or two, maybe they're waiting to jump the Saiyans if things go rough for their companion. Like there's some sort of backup almost. Because after all, we've seen that Damon was pretty strong for his size, and he was very good at surprising even the likes of our own Dragon team. And we do know that species from other universes can inhabit Universe 7 as well. Most notably, the Metal Men from Universe 6, you know, Megetta and all that. But also Jiren species we could have as well. Both of which would we see possibly as Moro's goons. But there is another very interesting theory sent to us by our viewers, in fact. We've mentioned it during our Up on the Lookout podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast channel up here for more in-depth discussions, by the way. But we also think it's worth mentioning here as well that Oatmeel is the eye itself. We received an interesting proposal from Gary Johnson, a viewer of our videos, who suggested to us that Oatmeel might be Granola's eye. Actually, Granola's eye. Like it's its own life form that lives in that, like a beneficial parasite. An extra consciousness that could have been coded into the character and then inserted into the eye, or the eye might be a living organism to begin with. We haven't seen them, they aren't called Oatmeel the Survivor, but maybe it could be a split personality created in order to operate the eye by itself, like two entities in one body. Also, the fact that we aren't hearing Oatmeel in chapter 72 might be that we're no longer following the events of the manga and the story from Granola's point of view. We're seeing it just from a general point of view, the Saiyan's point of view. Thusly, we don't follow it anymore, and we can't hear it, nor do we have the privilege of getting that extra introspection. There are some problems with this theory though, because Oatmeel was able to talk to Soshiro, and the bounty hunter was clearly aware of their existence. Still though, it is an interesting theory worth bringing up. But bouncing out of this one, we have a rather tragic proposition for you. That Oatmeel might be an imaginary friend, that Granola might be a bit... Listen, Granola has been through a lot, and he doesn't really need the additional personality that was implanted into him. Maybe, through sheer trauma, he developed a split personality called Oatmeel, or he called it Oatmeel, to help cope with his loneliness. Maybe when Soshiro was talking to the goggles, it was Granola himself, switching into that persona that was talking to him. Maybe, while Granola represents the obsession, stubbornness, and ambition of the whole, Oatmeel is the logic, reason, and empathy. That would also make sense since we haven't seen Oatmeel talk lately, or at least talk, as Granola really had no need of switching into that persona, just moving logic out the door. He's turned them off, like a light switch. You might think that this and our previous points are identical or not that particularly diverse, but the main difference between them is that at this point in the Dragon Ball Super story, Oatmeel is not a separate being, but maybe Granola's repressed good side, let's say. But just to wrap things off and really be a bit of a downer, Oatmeel might just be a guy in the chair sort of character, that archetype, which we might meet later. Now I bet you can probably tell though we're not thrilled about this. This is the least exciting prospect yet. One that we would rather than this not being the case, but we do need to mention it, we do need to think about it, as well as being pragmatic throughout all of this. Sometimes the most obvious outcome is the right one, unfortunately. Oatmeel might just be Granola's partner in crime, just another person, communicating with him from some remote location somewhere, helping him do his job, acting like some kind of spotter or informant. That's it. A random alien, which will probably be located and questioned by Vegeta and Goku later, trying to talk about what Granola's weaknesses are and how they can stop him. All when the plot demands it. And we know, that might be disappointing to you, but it doesn't seem to have been dispelled or disproved as of yet, so it could still happen. We've got to be aware of that possibility. Now, whatever Oatmeel turns out to be, it would be cool to get some more hints towards that mystery in the coming chapters, instead of just having nothing. But then again, It's cool that we have any mysteries in Dragon Ball at all at this point. It's not like the series is famous for them, and arguably, having some secrets can make up for the stakes not being as high in Dragon Ball as in the prior sagas of Z. But what do you folks think? Who do you think Oatmeal is? Do you even care? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!